Okay, here's a bit of info that I might not have elaborated on in the past. You can see this Hall sensor. This is out of a 1989-1990 Vanagon 2.1 liter. Customer complaint was intermittent nose start. It would crank fine. We determined there was no spark coming from the coil, and so we troubleshooted or if you can call it troubleshooting. We did some quick checks and determined that it was a faulty Hall sensor. This is the stubby Hall sensor that was in the distributor, and as you can see, I replaced it with the normal style, with the big style. You can convert, if yours has a big style Hall sensor. By big, what I mean is the connector is here, and the Hall sensor, the magnetic pickup part, is on this side, or on the opposite end of the distributor. Then you can convert to a stubby, which is perfectly fine, or you can convert back to the long one, as you can see. The reason is because on this 4-cylinder, you can see there's 4 windows, 1, 2, 3, 4. Every time that a metal shutter goes across the Hall sensor on this end, it interrupts the electric current or the magnetic field, which triggers a transistor, and then the center pin here gets grounded. So there's a voltage feed from the ignition module. Whenever the module sees that this center wire is grounded, or the voltage is grounded, then it triggers spark and it triggers fuel, because the engine computer gets the same signal as the ignition module. Okay, so long story short, when you have equal spaced windows, 4 of them in this case, and you can see there's an opening right here, and at the Hall sensor there's an opening. So in that case, you can swap in the small or the stubby Hall sensor. This is a 5-cylinder, so the Hall sensor here is missing, but let's assume that this sensor is right here, and you can see there's an open window right now. I can't turn it completely because this pin is in the way, so it doesn't line up, but let's just say it does line up. So the Hall sensor is in place, there's an open window. So remember, there's an open window here and there's an open window here, and that's the key. That's what allows me to swap between a big Hall sensor and a little one. So in this one here, there's an open window, but if you look right across, there's a closed window, there's a shutter wheel. So if the Hall sensor were sitting like this, it would have an interrupted signal, whereas here it's an open signal. So you cannot just swap between a big and a little guy. If there's a little sensor in here, put a little one in. If it has a big one, put the big one in. You can swap it, but what the problem is, and then you have to turn the distributor until the signal corresponds again. So basically what that means is, if it sits in here like this, and the Hall sensor is on this side, and there's a shutter wheel that's obstructing flow of the electrons, then you have to put this one in, rotate the distributor until it lines up with the next shutter wheel, because it's unequally spaced. Well, they're equally spaced, but it's not equal in terms of making contact with the other side up here. So if that makes sense. Sorry, I'm not explaining it right, or exactly or completely for everybody. I'm recording while I work, so I'm a bit of a time crunch right now. So that's the only thing you got to make note of, is if the shutter wheel, depending on where the sensor is, if there's a shutter wheel that's covering it, then you have to make sure that it's the same thing when you put the longer Hall sensor in. And again, you have to rotate the distributor in order to achieve that. Sometimes you can't rotate it far enough, in which case you may end up having to move ignition wires. But once you start doing that, you start opening a whole different can of worms. And again, I'm quickly going to show you what I do is in order to test, or in order to verify that it's a Hall sensor issue. Okay, so this is just a quick check. I'm just going to show you with the key in the on position. First, you want to make sure your test light is working. Just attach it to alternator, the alternator case, and then attach it to the battery post right here. What you want to do is make sure that one side has power. There's 3 pins. There's an outer power pin and a ground pin, and then the center pin is the signal pin, or the signal from the hall sensor. So this one here you can see has power, and then what you do is you swap over to swap the test light to battery positive, and then touch the ground side, so you've got ground on this side. Hi guys, sorry about the rude interruption. 2 things. I just want to clarify something about what I'm doing, and the other thing is, obviously for my female viewers, they do kind of want to see this every now and then, so that's the other reason why I'm in front of the camera. But anyways, in the past when I talked about checking the hall sensor and taking that hall sensor wiring plug or the harness plug and then grounding the sender terminal, in the past I said all you need is a metal paper clip and to briefly touch it to ground. Although that works, it's best to use a test light, which I am using in this video here, or as I'm demonstrating. So I just want to make sure, in case you are familiar with what I said in the past of using just a paper clip, it is better to use a test light, because the test light, it absorbs current or uses current. It doesn't allow current to rush as quickly as a paper clip, and that can affect things, be it in the engine computer, the ignition module, etc. So using a test light is a safer way to go. Anyways, back to the video. So then you swap back to ground, and then you momentarily touch the center pin of the hall sensor with the test light, and every time you touch it you should get a spark. You can see the spark, and you can hear the injectors clicking and fuel running as well. So that's how you check the hall sensor. If you get spark by manually manipulating the hall sensor harness plug, then but you don't get spark when this guy is plugged in and you're cranking, then you've got a faulty hall sensor.